Imagine stepping into a room full of possibilities, a first date brimming with potential. You feel excitement, curiosity, the thrill of connection. But beneath that excitement lies a truth so few acknowledge: not everyone is capable of showing up fully. Some carry walls, shields, and fears that will hurt you if you let them. Today, I want to empower you to see clearly, to protect your heart, not out of fear but out of love for yourself. You must understand one fundamental principle: energy reveals truth. The energy someone brings on a first date is their roadmap. Watch it, feel it, listen to the subtle signs. Are they present, open, and responsive? Or do they dodge the deeper questions, redirect the conversation, and keep everything on the surface? That is your first red flag. The next principle is clarity through courage. It takes courage to ask real questions, to be bold enough to seek the truth about who this person is. Avoidants thrive on ambiguity. They will charm you, make you laugh, and yet they will never truly meet you where you are. Recognize it. Call it out in your mind. Do not allow charm to blind your discernment. Understand this. A pattern is a principle in motion. Inconsistent communication, sudden withdrawals, and vague commitments are not accidents. They are windows into how someone truly relates to love. Observe, reflect, and honor your inner voice. Your intuition is a divine compass. Trust it before attachment clouds your judgment. Now, here is a transformative insight. Spotting an avoidant is not about rejection. It is about empowerment. It is about honoring your heart, protecting your emotional ecosystem, and refusing to settle for less than connection that feels whole. Every interaction teaches you. Every boundary you enforce strengthens you. Every no you give to the wrong energy opens space for the right one. So I challenge you. Step into your date with eyes wide open, heart courageous, and spirit unshakable. Watch the patterns, feel the presence, and honor your worth. Because love is not about persuasion, love is about alignment. Love is about finding someone who meets you fully, who reflects your energy, who chooses you as boldly as you choose yourself. When you understand this, something magical happens. You no longer chase, you no longer fear. You stand in your truth, radiate your value, and magnetically attract relationships that are not just exciting, but life-changing, soul-expanding, and profoundly aligned with who you are meant to be. Your first date is your testing ground, your laboratory for love. Be awake, be vigilant, and above all, be unafraid to honor the sacred power of your heart. Because when you do, you are no longer at the mercy of avoidance. You are the architect of the love you deserve. Emotional distance is the quiet signal that often goes unnoticed on a first date, yet it is one of the most telling indicators of someone who may be avoidant. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't necessarily involve overt rejection or hostility. Instead, it shows up subtly in the spaces between words, in the hesitation before they share personal details, in the way they glide over emotional topics without ever really landing on them. Emotional distance is a protective mechanism, a wall built from past fears, insecurities, or unresolved experiences. And while it may seem polite or charming on the surface, it is a powerful indicator of how this person engages or fails to engage with intimacy. On a first date, you might notice it in their stories. They speak in broad strokes, painting a picture of themselves without revealing the colors beneath the surface. Instead of describing their dreams, struggles, or personal growth, they recount events with neutrality, as though keeping a safe distance from themselves as well as from you. It's not about secrecy alone, it's about keeping the heart lightly tethered, avoiding the vulnerability required for true connection. They may laugh easily, tell interesting stories, and charm effortlessly. But when you try to ask something that touches on feelings, their response feels rehearsed or detached. They may smile, shift topics, or respond with humor to deflect. Techniques that feel smooth but ultimately protective. Another sign of emotional distance is how they respond to your emotional cues. If you share something personal or vulnerable, notice whether they match it with empathy or reciprocation. Avoidants often struggle to meet emotional disclosure with emotional disclosure. Instead, they might offer surface-level encouragement, a casual "that's great," or shift the focus back to themselves in a way that skirts the depth of your sharing. Their emotional presence is uneven, it flickers but doesn't burn steadily. This is not about being cold, it's about self-preservation. They may have learned that opening up leads to discomfort, conflict, or rejection, so they unconsciously maintain a safe distance from anyone who might pierce their protective walls. Physical cues often accompany this emotional distance. Leaning back, crossed arms, or minimal eye contact can all reflect an internal hesitation to fully engage. Subtle distractions, checking phones, or scanning the room may seem harmless, but they are small signals that their focus is not entirely on connection. The energy of emotional distance is palpable, even if the words are charming. You can feel it in the rhythm of the conversation, easy to engage with at the surface, yet frustratingly elusive when seeking real depth. It's crucial to recognize that emotional distance is not a reflection of your worth or the value of your presence. It is a reflection of the other person's limitations. Avoidants often carry fears of vulnerability, abandonment, or dependency, which manifest in behaviors that feel safe to them but can be confusing or painful to someone seeking genuine connection. By noticing emotional distance early, you gain clarity about whether this person can meet you in the kind of relationship you desire, or whether they are likely to maintain a pattern of avoidance. Emotional distance also shows up in how they discuss past relationships or commitments. They may be vague, neutral, or evasive, avoiding introspection about patterns or lessons learned. They rarely show emotional accountability, and they may frame experiences in a way that maintains detachment. This can feel polite, but it's a signal that they have difficulty engaging with feelings, both theirs and yours, on a level required for intimacy. Finally, emotional distance can reveal itself in the pace of the connection. Avoidants often keep things moving lightly and quickly over the surface, but resist the natural deepening that comes from authentic engagement. They may show excitement in bursts, but retreat when closeness approaches. This push and pull dynamic is a hallmark of avoidance. The more you notice the pattern, the easier it becomes to read, interpret, and make decisions that protect your heart. Reluctance to commit is one of the most revealing signs that someone may be avoidant, and it often surfaces very early in the dating process, even on a first date. It's not always loud or confrontational. It doesn't have to be expressed as an outright refusal. Often it's subtle, woven into the way they talk about the future, respond to questions about plans, or react to discussions about relationships in general. When someone is reluctant to commit, they create distance, not through absence alone, but through ambiguity, deflection, and careful avoidance of anything that might suggest permanence or vulnerability. Understanding this behavior is crucial, because commitment is not merely about marriage or a serious label. It is about emotional availability, willingness to invest, and readiness to align with another person's life. Avoidants often struggle with these principles, and their reluctance becomes a protective shield to maintain independence at the expense of connection. On a first date, reluctance to commit may appear as vague answers to direct questions about the future. If you ask, "Where do you see yourself in a year?" or "What are you looking for in a relationship?" an avoidant will often respond with broad generalities or deflections. They may focus on external goals, work, travel, hobbies, without integrating the possibility of a shared path with someone else. They rarely provide a clear sense of where they stand emotionally or what they're willing to invest. This isn't laziness, it is a deep-seated pattern designed to avoid feeling trapped or exposed. The avoidance mind naturally creates distance to protect itself from the perceived threat of closeness, and their words reflect this strategy. Another manifestation of reluctance to commit is inconsistency between words and actions. They may express interest and connection in conversation, but their behavior lacks follow-through. Invitations may be nonspecific. Plans may be left ambiguous, or promises may not be honored reliably. The avoidance goal is not to hurt or manipulate intentionally. It is to preserve emotional autonomy. Yet the result can feel confusing or disheartening to someone who is seeking clarity and mutual investment. Observing how their commitments align with their words provides an early insight into whether this person is capable of genuine partnership, or whether avoidance dominates their relational patterns. Reluctance to commit is often paired with fear-based rationalizations. Avoidants frequently speak in terms of "I'm not ready, I have too much going on," or "I don't want to rush things," even when the relationship is in its infancy. While these statements may seem reasonable on the surface, the underlying pattern is one of hesitation to fully engage. Avoidants are highly skilled at framing avoidance as prudence or practicality, making it easy for someone to misinterpret their emotional distance as carefulness rather than as a structural barrier to intimacy. It also shows up in conversations about vulnerability and emotional transparency. A person reluctant to commit will often avoid discussing feelings in depth, sidestep difficult topics, or redirect discussions that could imply a need for emotional investment. They may keep the mood light, humorous, or playful, Yet this surface-level charm is a protective mechanism. By avoiding deeper questions about connection, needs, or future alignment, they minimize the risk of emotional exposure. Recognizing this pattern early is vital because it allows you to assess whether the connection you are building is with someone who is capable of mutual commitment or with someone whose instinct is to retreat when intimacy demands investment. Reluctance to commit is not only about future promises, it also affects the present. Avoidants often resist integrating a new relationship into their daily lives. They may avoid introducing you to friends or family, hesitate to plan joint activities, or maintain a sense of emotional separation even while physically present. This consistent pattern of detachment is a protective strategy that preserves independence but hinders the formation of genuine partnership. By observing reluctance to commit, you gain insight into the avoidance relational framework and how it may impact your experience together. Recognizing this early gives you the opportunity to protect your emotional well-being, set clear boundaries, and make conscious choices about whether to continue investing in someone whose primary pattern is withdrawal rather than engagement. Inconsistent communication is one of the most revealing signs that someone may have avoidant tendencies, and it often appears very early in a connection, even during the first few days after a first date. On the surface, it might seem harmless, or you might initially interpret it as busyness or a difference in communication style. But when examined closely, inconsistent communication is rarely accidental. It is a behavioral pattern that reflects deeper emotional avoidance. Avoidants struggle with the balance between intimacy and independence, and their inconsistent contact is a manifestation of that inner tension. They want connection, but they fear it at the same time, and their communication becomes the tool they use to navigate this push and pull dynamic. Recognizing these patterns early is crucial because communication is the lifeline of a healthy relationship. If someone cannot maintain consistent communication from the very beginning, it is likely that deeper relational patterns of withdrawal will persist. Inconsistent communication can take many forms. One day they may be engaged, responsive, and seemingly excited to talk with you. Texts are prompt, conversations flow naturally, and plans are easy to make. The next day, however, messages may go unanswered for hours or even days. Calls may be missed without explanation, and their availability feels unpredictable. This inconsistency is confusing, often leaving the other person questioning their own worth, overanalyzing every word or gesture. The avoidance mind is not intentionally cruel. It operates from a place of fear. The ebb and flow of attention is their way of protecting themselves from feeling emotionally overwhelmed while still maintaining the option of connection. Another aspect of inconsistent communication is the quality of interaction. Even when they do respond or reach out, the depth and engagement may fluctuate. Sometimes conversations feel vibrant and open. Other times they feel minimal, superficial, or detached. An avoidant may engage in bursts of excitement and energy when feeling safe or stimulated, only to withdraw suddenly when vulnerability or commitment is implied. This inconsistency is not random. It is a reflection of their internal struggle with closeness. They oscillate between the desire for connection and the fear of losing control or feeling exposed. Learning to recognize this pattern is vital because it reveals the limits of their emotional availability. Avoidants also tend to communicate inconsistently about future plans. They may enthusiastically agree to something one day, only to hesitate, cancel, or be non-committal later. This behavior serves as a buffer against potential disappointment or emotional investment. By keeping plans uncertain, they maintain a sense of independence and avoid feeling tied down, even when they feel an attraction or initial connection. Understanding this allows you to see that inconsistency is not simply forgetfulness or disinterest. It is a structural feature of how they engage with others. It is important to note that inconsistent communication often creates a psychological pattern for the person they are dating. The unpredictability can trigger overthinking, heightened anticipation, and even emotional anxiety. While this may not be the avoidance intention, it is a natural consequence of their behavior. Recognizing this pattern early allows you to take a step back and assess whether the relationship aligns with your values, needs, and emotional capacity. It also enables you to protect your energy rather than unconsciously adapting to their inconsistent rhythm. Finally, inconsistent communication is often paired with rationalizations. Avoidants may claim they are busy, distracted, or not good with texting, framing the behavior as situational rather than patterned. While everyone can have genuinely busy periods, patterns that repeat over time, especially when coupled with emotional withdrawal, are telling. By observing both the frequency and quality of communication, you can discern whether someone is capable of being present consistently or whether inconsistency is their default relational mode. The key insight here is that inconsistent communication is never just about communication. It reflects deeper emotional habits and patterns. It signals how someone engages with connection, trust, and intimacy. By paying attention to these early signs, you gain the power to recognize relational dynamics before becoming entangled in confusion, frustration, or emotional strain. Overly charming but shallow behavior is one of the most seductive and subtle indicators that someone may have avoidant tendencies. On a first date, it can feel exhilarating. They laugh easily, tell captivating stories, and make you feel seen and admired. Their charisma is magnetic, their humor effortless, and their energy engaging. At first glance, it can feel like an ideal connection, and it's easy to mistake charm for depth. But charm alone is not an indicator of emotional availability. What separates a truly connected person from an avoidant is the substance behind the charm, the ability to engage authentically, to be vulnerable, and to invest emotionally. When someone is overly charming but shallow, the surface sparkle hides a lack of willingness or capacity to go deeper, to truly meet you where you are. The hallmark of this behavior is that while the conversation feels lively and enjoyable, it rarely touches on anything meaningful or intimate. They may steer clear of personal challenges, deeper desires, or experiences that shaped who they are. If you ask questions that require emotional honesty or self-reflection, they may deflect with humor, change the subject, or offer vague responses that sound polished but lack real depth. This creates the illusion of connection without the substance. The excitement you feel is real, it's your own emotional engagement, but the avoidant remains safely distant, never fully participating in the vulnerability that true intimacy requires. Overly charming but shallow behavior also manifests in their attention toward you. They may shower you with compliments, make you feel admired, and focus on making you laugh or feel good, but the focus is rarely balanced with genuine curiosity about your inner world. They notice surface-level traits, rather than emotional states or personal growth. This pattern can feel intoxicating, but it is a protective mechanism. Charm draws people in while emotional depth remains carefully shielded. Avoidants have often learned that showing true vulnerability comes with risk, so they rely on charm as a way to engage without risking exposure. Another sign of shallow charm is inconsistency in values and intentions. They may present themselves as aligned with your interests, beliefs, or lifestyle in order to create a sense of connection, but these alignments often remain superficial. Their stories and anecdotes are carefully curated to impress, rather than reveal authentic self-knowledge or insight. It's as if they are performing a version of themselves that is appealing rather than real. This makes it difficult to gauge their true character, as everything seems polished, rehearsed, or strategically presented. Recognizing this pattern is crucial, because depth is tested over time, not in moments of charisma alone. Avoidants who rely on charm often avoid conversations about emotional needs, boundaries, or long-term intentions. Even when the discussion moves toward topics that require honesty, they deflect or respond in ways that maintain emotional distance. This behavior is particularly important to notice on a first date because it signals how they approach relational engagement overall. Charm may be present, but it is a substitute for connection, a tool to create proximity without genuine intimacy. It's also important to note that overly charming but shallow individuals often create a sense of excitement that can be addictive. The highs of connection, laughter, and validation can obscure the underlying absence of depth. Emotional awareness becomes clouded by the thrill of their presence, which is why many people only recognize the avoidant pattern after investing more time and energy. By observing the quality of engagement rather than the quantity of charm, you can discern whether the person is capable of sustained, meaningful connection, or whether they are using charm as a mask for avoidance. Ultimately, recognizing someone who is overly charming but shallow empowers you to differentiate between temporary excitement and genuine emotional resonance. True intimacy requires vulnerability, shared authenticity, and the willingness to navigate discomfort together. Charm without depth is a warning sign, a signal that this person may not be ready or willing to meet you fully. Being aware of this pattern allows you to honor your own needs, maintain clarity, and protect your heart from the subtle, alluring traps of superficial connection. Deflecting vulnerability is one of the most telling behaviors of an avoidant person, and it often surfaces very early in dating, even on the first encounter. Vulnerability is the doorway to connection, the bridge that allows two people to truly understand, empathize, and bond with one another. When someone deflects vulnerability, they are avoiding that doorway, either consciously or unconsciously, because intimacy triggers fear, discomfort, or the possibility of losing control. This behavior can be subtle and insidious. It's not always obvious as outright avoidance. Instead, it often appears as humor, topic changes, or vague responses when deeper emotional questions arise. Recognizing this pattern is essential because it reflects not just a reluctance to share, but a broader pattern of emotional unavailability that can prevent authentic connection. On a first date, deflection often occurs when you ask questions that touch on feelings, past experiences, or personal growth. A healthy response would involve some level of introspection, acknowledgement, or honesty, even if it is tentative. In contrast, an avoidant may laugh off the question, answer superficially, or pivot to another subject entirely. For example, if you ask about a challenging experience, they might respond with a joke, a generic statement, or shift the conversation to something lighthearted or unrelated. This is not simply an attempt to avoid discomfort, it is a protective mechanism rooted in their fear of exposure. By deflecting vulnerability, they create a buffer that shields them from the emotional intensity of intimacy. Another sign of deflecting vulnerability is the avoidance of self-disclosure. Avoidants often reveal only what is safe, socially acceptable, or flattering, leaving the deeper layers of their personality hidden. They may tell stories that entertain or impress without ever revealing what they felt, learned, or struggled with in those moments. This behavior is a form of emotional armor. It allows them to appear engaging and relatable while minimizing risk. On a first date, it can feel charming or intriguing, but over time, the lack of real disclosure prevents meaningful connection. Authenticity is missing, replaced by a curated persona designed to engage without being exposed. Deflecting vulnerability also appears in how they respond to your emotional sharing. When you attempt to be open or honest about your feelings, an avoidant might redirect the focus back to themselves superficially, minimize your experience, or use humor to lighten the emotional weight. While this can feel like attentiveness, it is actually a subtle form of evasion. They are present, but only in a way that maintains distance. Their energy may feel warm and engaged, but it does not match the depth of your own vulnerability. The imbalance creates a dynamic where you may feel seen but not truly understood or reciprocated. This pattern is further reinforced by a fear of commitment to emotional honesty. Avoidants often associate vulnerability with risk, the risk of rejection, of loss, of being controlled, or of losing autonomy. Because of this fear, they unconsciously train themselves to respond in ways that keep intimacy at a distance. This is why deflection is often so consistent and predictable. It is their default strategy for managing emotional discomfort. On a first date, recognizing this pattern gives you critical insight into how they may engage or fail to engage with deeper emotional connection in the future. Finally, deflecting vulnerability can manifest in subtle behavioral cues beyond conversation. Body language may shift when emotional topics arise, a slight leaning back, crossed arms, or avoiding eye contact. They may become more animated in humor or distracting gestures, creating a physical buffer that mirrors their emotional deflection. Paying attention to these signs alongside verbal cues allows you to perceive the full picture of their relational style. By noticing when someone deflects vulnerability, you gain clarity about their emotional availability. It is not about judgment, it is about awareness. Avoiding vulnerability signals a pattern that can prevent real intimacy, leaving the heart exposed to frustration or disappointment. Recognizing this early empowers you to make conscious choices about your emotional investment and to prioritize connections with those capable of genuine, reciprocal openness. One of the most revealing behaviors of an avoidant person is their tendency to pull away quickly, often at moments when connection begins to deepen. This behavior is subtle yet powerful, and it can create confusion, frustration, and emotional turbulence for anyone dating an avoidant. Pulling away is not always overt. It can manifest as physical distance, emotional withdrawal, or abrupt changes in engagement. At its core, it reflects an internal struggle between the desire for connection and the fear of vulnerability. Avoidants often crave intimacy on some level, but when it approaches a point that feels too close, too revealing, or too binding, their instinct is to retreat. Understanding this pattern is crucial, because the speed and consistency of their withdrawal reveal more about their relational capacity than any words they may say on the first date. On a first date, this behavior can appear in small but meaningful ways. They may seem fully engaged and present at the beginning, laughing, sharing stories, and creating a sense of connection, only to subtly withdraw as a conversation moves toward emotional depth or future possibilities. Their tone may change, they may become less responsive, or they may suddenly redirect topics to safer, lighter subjects. This withdrawal is rarely random. It is a protective mechanism designed to maintain control and emotional distance. The closer the interaction gets to genuine intimacy, the faster and more unconsciously they may pull back. Recognizing these moments is critical, because they are the early indicators of how this person will respond when the relationship requires sustained vulnerability and commitment. Quick withdrawal is also evident in communication patterns. After a promising first date, an avoidant may respond inconsistently or with minimal enthusiasm. They may delay returning messages, appear distracted, or create subtle barriers that slow the pace of the connection. This pullback is not necessarily a reflection of disinterest. It is a reflection of fear. Avoidants often feel threatened by closeness because it exposes them to potential emotional risk, dependency, or perceived loss of autonomy. The faster they sense intimacy, the faster their protective mechanisms activate. Understanding this pattern allows you to separate their behavior from your own self-worth, recognizing that their pullback is about their internal dynamics rather than your value or desirability. Physical cues during a date can also indicate this tendency. They may lean back, cross their arms, or avoid eye contact during emotionally charged moments. Subtle gestures, such as checking their phone frequently or glancing around the room, signal a subconscious retreat. Even in conversation, they may truncate emotional topics or provide brief, non-committal answers to personal questions. These behaviors create a sense of imbalance. You may feel drawn in while they subtly step back, creating a dynamic that is difficult to interpret without awareness. Observing these cues early provides insight into their patterns before deeper emotional investment occurs. Another dimension of quick withdrawal is their tendency to create ambiguity around intentions or future engagement. Avoidants may make plans enthusiastically in the moment, only to cancel or hesitate later. They may avoid discussions about commitment, future dates, or relational expectations, retreating whenever the conversation moves toward clarity. This pattern is not accidental. It is a learned strategy to maintain autonomy while still engaging enough to feel connected superficially. By noticing this behavior on a first date, you gain a clear understanding of their relational habits and the likelihood of sustained emotional availability. Recognizing someone who is quick to pull away empowers you to protect your heart and set appropriate boundaries. It is a signal to pay attention to patterns rather than promises, and to understand that emotional retreat is often a reflection of their internal fears, not a judgment on your worth. Early recognition allows you to make conscious choices about whether to continue investing in someone whose default response to closeness is withdrawal, and to prioritize connections where engagement, presence, and intimacy are mutual and sustainable. A person who is overly focused on self-interest often reveals one of the clearest signs of avoidant tendencies. On a first date, it can appear as charm, confidence, or excitement about personal accomplishments, but beneath the surface lies a subtle imbalance in attention, energy, and emotional investment. Someone focused primarily on themselves may dominate conversations, highlight their achievements, or consistently redirect topics back to their own experiences, thoughts, or desires. While everyone naturally shares about themselves, the key difference with an avoidant is that their sharing is rarely reciprocal. They show limited curiosity about you, your world, or your inner life. This imbalance reflects an underlying prioritization of autonomy and self-preservation over connection, which can prevent genuine intimacy from forming. One of the most noticeable signs of self-interest is conversational imbalance. On a first date, they may appear engaging, but the dialogue often revolves around their experiences, opinions, or lifestyle. They may ask questions, but these questions are often superficial or quickly pivot back to themselves. For example, if you share a personal story or a meaningful insight, they may respond with a brief acknowledgement. before transitioning to their own narrative. This pattern can feel flattering initially, as it creates the illusion of compatibility, but over time it reveals a relational structure where your feelings, thoughts, and experiences are secondary to their own. This self-focus is not necessarily intentional manipulation. It is a habitual pattern that prioritizes safety and control over mutual vulnerability. Another aspect of self-interest in avoidance is the tendency to frame interactions in ways that protect their independence. They may express excitement about connection in the moment, yet maintain boundaries that limit emotional availability. They might celebrate personal achievements or discuss life goals with enthusiasm, but they rarely integrate discussions about how a relationship could evolve or how emotional needs could be met mutually. This behavior signals an internal orientation towards self, rather than towards shared engagement. On a first date, recognizing this allows you to observe not just what is said, but what is absent, their willingness to explore relational depth, emotional reciprocity, and commitment. Self-interest also becomes apparent in the allocation of energy and attention. Avoidants often appear fully present in short bursts, particularly when they are enjoying themselves or feeling in control. However, sustained engagement, particularly around emotional topics, can trigger subtle withdrawal, disinterest, or diversion. Their focus is often on maintaining comfort and minimizing vulnerability rather than building authentic connection. You may notice that they respond enthusiastically to light or surface-level topics, but when conversations move toward values, emotions, or relational alignment, their energy diminishes or they redirect. This pattern is a reflection of avoidance. Emotional investment requires risk, and avoidance is their default strategy to maintain security. Another important indicator is how they discuss future plans. Avoidants with a strong self-interest orientation may speak about their personal goals, travels, or ambitions in ways that center exclusively on themselves. Even when future possibilities are raised, they rarely frame them in terms of shared experience or collaboration. Their language may emphasize independence, personal space, or maintaining flexibility, which subtly signals that connection with others is secondary to self-prioritization. Recognizing this early allows you to understand whether this person has the capacity for true partnership or whether relational engagement is conditional on their comfort and control. It is also crucial to notice how self-interest affects empathy and attentiveness. On a first date, someone focused primarily on themselves may struggle to offer genuine emotional validation, reflective listening, or reciprocal curiosity. They may nod, smile, or offer polite affirmations, but the engagement is functional rather than heartfelt. Emotional resonance is minimal because their attention is predominantly inward, oriented towards self-expression and self-preservation rather than mutual understanding. By observing a pattern of self-interest, you gain clarity about relational alignment. This behavior is not inherently malicious. It is a reflection of the avoidance relational template, where prioritizing self is a protective strategy. Recognizing it allows you to make conscious choices about how much emotional energy to invest, how to set boundaries, and whether this person can offer the reciprocity, engagement, and depth necessary for a fulfilling connection. Understanding self-interest as a signal rather than a judgment empowers you to protect your heart while remaining open to connections that honor both partners equally. Thank you for your time and trust. Wishing you clarity, strength, and heartful connections ahead. Goodbye, and may every step you take lead you closer to the love and fulfillment you deserve.